Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good people. Yeah, you know what it is. Hard worker, scrappy, unfiltered, and sometimes unhinged football content. Hard to explain, but you know it when you see it. Doing it daily our way. I don't know what you're talking about right now. Redraft and Dynasty Fantasy Football, we got you covered. You know their defense is ranked like 31st in the NFL? NFL draft prospects and rookies? Now you know you in the right place for that.
Absolutely.
All right, then stop saying it. Then we're done. And prop bets with my man JRich. Count that money, man. Now wipe the crust out of your eyes. Get you a cup of coffee. It's time to wake your ass up with Ray G. You honestly are making absolutely no sense and you sound silly as hell. GMGP. It is Monday, July the 8th, 2024. Y'all decided to wake y'all asses up with Ray G. I appreciate each and every person in the building, each and every person on the stream. If you're listening in the car, in the train, in the plane, doesn't matter. Appreciate y'all being here this morning. Who we got in the building? What's going on, Mix? What's going down with you, baby? What's happening with you, Jeff? I see Best Ball on call in the damn building. GMGP. What's going on with you, baby? Drew Sorensen Music. What's happening with you, folks? Sean, CB, Ty Declare, Patrick Price, Fizzle Dollars. I hear you, baby. What's going down with you? Mr. Breaks a lot. I'm not good. We got the crew in the building. We're going to talk some veterans, some old players. But Jay, kill the music real quick, man. Kill the music. Cut the music. Cut the music. Cut the music. Appreciate everybody being in here. You know, it's not often we got to start out talking about these type of things, but I think it is very appropriate just to pay respects to probably the biggest piece of news that hit this past weekend. Very sad news. Very sad news. Minnesota Vikings 4th round pick, cornerback, played at Oregon, played at Alabama. Khyree Jackson was involved in an automobile accident, and he, along with two other of his former high school teammates, who also played collegiate ball, passed away this past weekend in that tragic car accident. It's just heartbreaking to hear this type of stuff. Life, right? Life. Former Alabama, Oregon Duck. Now Minnesota Vikings rookie cornerback or former Vikings cornerback Khyree Jackson and two others were killed in a car crash Saturday morning. PG County, Maryland. According to Maryland State Police, Jackson was 24 years old. He was in the front seat of a Dodge Charger, part of a 3-car collision in Upper Marlboro. He's pronounced dead on the scene. Also, Isaiah Hazel, 23 years old, and Anthony Lighton Jr., 24, were also killed in the crash. They were high school teammates, played collegiate football, and Jackson was just about to begin his career with the Minnesota Vikings. There aren't a lot of details that have come out from that accident. There are speculation that alcohol may have been involved by the other driver who was not injured. There was another person that was hit. They were also uninjured. You know, for me, it's just one of those things. My wife and I talk about it all the time. Low tolerance for anybody who drinks and drives, especially in the age that we live in today with Uber and taxis and ways to maneuver around and leave your vehicle. It's just very sad and unfortunate that if that is the case. And, you know, I'm not here to preach to anybody, but if anybody has lost somebody due to something like that, then my condolences and heart goes out to you. I saw pictures of the accident. I'm not going to show those, but it did not look good at all, and we know that's the outcome. So prayers up to everybody involved, their families, friends. I'm sure that's going to be a very difficult thing for them to move past. And if you're fans of the Vikings, fans of the player, Oregon, Alabama, we got a chance to see him down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. Didn't get a chance to meet him or talk to him, but he was there. Looked like he was going to be a very good player. So unfortunate news there out of Minnesota in the sports world. And just as a family man, if you got kids out there, it's like one of the worst things to even think about your child in a car accident and not making it home. So hate to start off the show with that somber news, and I promise you we're going to turn it around and make you feel good as you drive into work this Monday morning. But let me bring JRich on the screen. JRich, how you doing this morning, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good, Ray. Very well put about Khyree. Wish him and his family lots of prayers and hopes. You know, I think for you especially, the work you put in for your child to get to where he wants to get to ultimately never see it come to fruition is extremely sad. The dedication that he took to get there is ridiculous. So to get that taken away really sucks. But prayers to him and his family. Very well said, Ray. But yeah, we got a show to do. It's veterans, it's senior citizens, it's guys that are older. You know, the thumbnail says it all, right? It's interesting because these are guys that have been staples for years and years and years. But at some point, Ray, someone's got to change.
At some point,
They're over the hill and there's no coming back. So that's what we're talking today, veterans on the show. But Ray, there was some news that did pop up that was, we'll see if it means anything.
What was the news? There was not a lot on the news and nose front, but what you got, Jay?
So, Ray, I don't know how you feel about this, but Malik Neighbors making it rain in the strip club.
Stop.
I don't know where he was. I didn't see anything about.
Looks
you
fun.
don't care.
No, looks like he had a good
fun.
time.
All right.
Yeah, he was enjoying his time.
Do you think that this raises or lowers his stock?
Zero.
Damn,
Zero. It was a strip club,
making it rain in the strip club.
Strip club.
Ray's not a fan of the strip clubs. Do they got good food at the strip club?
There's nothing wrong with the strip club, man. I don't know about. I mean, that's that. Let me just
He's
say
what,
this.
21, 22?
That they are. It's just, I don't want to say it's overrated. Like, who cares? He's in there, strip club, kicking it, drinking, partying, spending his money. No harm, no foul, no story. Have fun, young man. Just be ready to play when it's time to play. You did talk to me pre-show about Brandon Ayuk is still in the news.
Yes.
And what is Ayuk doing today? What is going on with Brandon Ayuk today?
Brandon Ayuk's villain arc is definitely getting stronger and stronger by the day. He wants to be in the news. He wants to be talked about. I don't know what it is with Brandon Ayuk, but he continues to kind of put himself in the news. He posted on his TikTok highlights of Commanders practice. So all 22 footage from the back end zone of Commanders practice, probably hanging out with Jaden Daniels, maybe watching some tape. But, Ayuk had to just take a little picture and say, hey guys, I'm watching Commanders film. What do you think of that, Ray? Do you think what would you say the chances that Ayuk plays in Washington this season versus San Francisco? And is that an upgrade for fantasy? Because I don't think it is, but there just seems to be a lot of steam, and it's mostly generated by Ayuk, to be fair, that he could be in Washington this season.
I'm going to be very honest with you. Of all the sports things that we discuss and things that people get tired of, whether that be Justin Fields, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, this is probably the story that is the most, I'm just over it. You're Brandon Ayuk. You're a good player. You're not Amon-Ra. You're not CeeDee Lamb. You're not Jamar Chase. You're not Justin
Antonio
Jefferson.
Brown either.
I don't, this is it. Shut the hell up, dude. Does it make sense? For this type of action. Sure. Adam Peters is in Washington now. He probably has some relationship. Who knows? Yeah. Is it better? No. I don't believe it would be a better situation. I don't believe it would be an upgrade in Washington over San Francisco, whose offense is just crazy efficient. I'm so sick of watching or listening or talking about Brandon Ayuk. Go on the field, play for the Niners, do your thing, go on a new team next year, or get traded and go play. But all of this, I'm going to post videos of the Commanders. It just seems childish. It just seems childish. It doesn't seem like the way to go about getting business done. Just seems quite childish from Brandon Ayuk, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird, right? Should he be doing this? As your point, probably not good enough to be forcing his way out of a team. I'm not even going to say.
I don't even want to say it that way, but I mean, you're not. I don't want to say it that way, but it's just, dude, you're not one of those guys.
I think it's interesting to think about, is he just trying to put pressure on the organization to get him out, right? Maybe that's his motive, right? To stay in the news, to do this kind of things, to kind of upset the organization enough to maybe where they will move him. The problem is they probably aren't going to move him where he wants to if he continues to act this way. But Ray, there was some pretty big news in the sports world because Lewis Hamilton finally won a race. It had been 954 days since Lewis Hamilton won a race. He won the British Grand Prix, his home race, in his last time racing for Mercedes at the British Grand Prix. So it's a pretty big deal. I don't know if you watched any of it, but I would highly encourage anyone to go and just look at some of the highlights at the end of the race and the way it was very emotional from him. Really, really cool. One of the best racers of our generation, and 39 years old. I believe he's the oldest race winner in history. Won his home race. Really, really cool story. So I wanted to give a shout out to Lewis Hamilton for finally winning a race. It was a really good race at that too. But yeah, 954 days since winning a race. Finally got it done. But Ray, you put out some great content over the weekend. So tell the people what they need to go and watch.
Yeah, we put out a video yesterday. Myself and Dwain McFarland, we put out a video on the channel. It seems like people like it, Jay. I'm not sure, but it seems like the reaction has been positive to the video about NFL schemes and how they impact teams, NFL situations. Commentary has been fantastic. The feedback, it's something that I've been talking about for quite some time on this channel, Jay, and I haven't found very many people that are NFL/fantasy football DJing enough to dive into this topic alongside with me, but Dwain is phenomenal, does work at Fantasy Life, and we got to nerd out on real football stuff and how it's impacting the things that we're chasing in fantasy football. And I truly believe, Jay, that this is going to be the trends and the ways of fantasy football in the future. It's not just going to be, the basic standard stuff that everybody has, war, this, that, my rankings. It's going to be looking at individual situations and play callers and schemes and trying to figure out which offenses yield more fantasy points than others. And it's some of the things that we're doing over here at DD. So if you missed that episode with Dwain, highly, highly encourage you to go back and check that out. I think it's amazing content. I'm telling you that straight up, man. We also had Todd Claire drop the trade show on Saturday. So if you missed that, go back and check out that show from Saturday. And if you happen to miss Shane Says that dropped on Friday, go back and check that out as well. But Jay, we've got to get into these old guys, the geriatrics, NFL veterans. And we've talked so much about the young guys, the second-year players, rookies, which young guys are going to ascend. Yet we look across the NFL, and every year, we walk into the season, Jay, and the old guys are going to be on the field, the veterans, the players that have done it before, the players that have produced and shown that they can be effective in the NFL. And we've got some old guys, Jay, very old, that are being drafted very high with high expectations for this fall. And the conversation that I want to have today is, are these bets you want to make or are these busts that you probably want to get off of? And I want to dive deeper than just, I like this veteran or not, but talk about the implications if the player is good and if the player has hit that cliff and falls off, what happens? Are there any other options behind the old starting veteran that you would prefer to have? Or, what happens to the dynasty value of said player when all hell breaks loose and the player kind of falls off a cliff and starts to decline a little bit? And the first player that I want to talk about, Jay, and there has not been a lot of conversation around this player in particular. And I think a lot of the reason is we just expect him to walk into this situation and be the same old running back of the past. But let's just have a conversation with where you are with one Derrick Henry and his new role in the Baltimore Ravens offense with Lamar Jackson. Well, you're talking about the quintessential 3-down running back in the world of fantasy football where there is no such thing as a bell cow. Derrick Henry historically has been just that, the bell cow, workhorse running back, consistent top performer. The Ravens, 4th in the NFL in rushing TDs last year, only behind Miami, San Francisco, and Detroit. The high rushing floor that comes with Derrick Henry in this Baltimore Ravens offense. Where are you at with Derrick Henry this year, who's currently going off of the board, ADP of 31.5 on Underdog Fantasy, RB9, ahead of Travis Etienne, Isaiah Pacheco, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, players like that. What do you think about Derrick Henry this year and beyond in Dynasty in his new situation in Baltimore, Jay?
I think the interesting thing about Derrick Henry is really just the rushing floor and what is it going to be, right? When you look at sportsbook projections, he is number 2 behind Christian McCaffrey, right? Christian McCaffrey, 1,150 yards, 10.5 touchdowns. Derrick Henry's the only other player above, it looks like 8.5 touchdowns, Raheem Mostert is at 8.5. But Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, the only players at 10.5. So the one reason why I do still like Derrick Henry, even at this ADP, is the very high rushing floor and, more importantly, the very high touchdown projection, right? Baltimore Ravens were 4th in the NFL in terms of rushing touchdowns last season. Now we know that Lamar Jackson will contribute to that, but having that high floor being only behind San Francisco, Miami, and Detroit is a pretty good spot to be in for a running back that we know is great in the red zone. The problem for Derrick Henry is you called him a 3-down running back, but is he really going to catch passes? Now,
I called him a bell cow. I didn't call him a 3-down. I said
3-down, and I was like,
I said a bell. I think I said
about Derrick Henry.
Okay.
You said
right.
bell cow, but you also said 3-down. Either way, the point that you brought up to open this show is there anybody behind him that can take his opportunity? There is Justice Hill. There's Keaton Mitchell, who we don't expect to play much at all this year.
No.
There's Rasheen Ali, who was drafted in the 5th round this year. Maybe he could get on the field a little bit. But the good thing is that there really isn't a lot behind him. Will it be Justice Hill? Maybe. Is it Keaton Mitchell? Probably not. Going to be Rasheen Ali? Maybe a little bit. So I think if you were to bet on anybody as a potential riser through Derrick Henry's inability to operate on that third down, Ali could be an option because we know it's probably not going to be Mitchell. And then the big thing here with Henry is I don't think the ADP is crazy, but if you think Travis Etienne's going to have a big pass catching role, then he could be more of a value because he still has a pretty high rushing floor. Isaiah Pacheco, of course, massive touchdown upside playing for the Chiefs. But outside of that, I still really like where you're taking Henry, and I think his floor that he provides as a back-end RB1 is worth it. The question, Ray, that I posed to you is, do you think there is a rushing yard ceiling for Derrick Henry in this Baltimore offense? Because I do think there's a world where maybe he's not cooked, but he's not that old Derrick Henry we're used to, where he's going to be rushing for 1,400, 1,500 yards. I think we're looking probably closer to a ceiling of around 1,300 if we're being a bit more realistic about the outcomes for Derrick Henry in 2024. So when you talk about a veteran who's aging a bit, maybe the rushing ceiling isn't quite there, but I still really like the touchdown upside we get from him and should be double digits this season for sure.
He's one where I'm just prepared to go down with the ship. I'm just prepared. I'm just prepared to ride off into the sunset. I do think the situation is good. That offense, they want to run the ball. That's historically been their style. You've got that RPO action with Lamar Jackson. You do have passing options, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews. I'll be putting out a piece about Zay Flowers and Baltimore's passing attack soon. I think it's a little underrated. But yeah, Derrick Henry, there's nothing, there are no fantasy implications behind Derrick Henry. You know what this feels like, Jay? This feels like the last sort of hurrah with this iteration of this offense. And once Henry is done, whenever that does wear off, they'll find another running back. It's not going to be, let me say this, because I don't want to speak in definites like I know, but I do not believe the star running back of the future is currently on the Baltimore Ravens behind Derrick Henry. So if he does fail,
for sure,
I don't think there are big fantasy implications behind him. I don't believe Rasheen Ali is going to be next up, or Justice Hill, or Keaton Mitchell. This just feels like Derrick Henry's spot to either thrive or fail in, and I'm going to bet on the side of the king. I am not going to fade Derrick Henry. I'm fine with his RB9 price tag on Underdog Fantasy right now. I'm good with Derrick Henry. I'm betting on him. I don't think he's going to bust. I'm going to bet on Derrick Henry in 2024. We're going to talk about a pair of wide receivers, Jay, who are going very high right now in Underdog Fantasy drafts. We're going to talk first about one player from the AFC, Jay, who is being drafted in the second round, and he has to eclipse 30 years old, has given us some monster seasons. But let's talk about one, DaVantae Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders, Jay. DaVantae Adams. Tay Adams coming off the board as wide receiver 14, ADP of 19.3 on Underdog Fantasy. We know what Adams has done historically. We know what he brings to the table. And we also know that the Raiders right now are in this weird QB thing with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. All reports that I'm seeing is it looks like it's going to be Gardner Minshew getting the first crack at that thing. But Adams, elite talent. We know what he's done. But uncertainty at quarterback really poses some interesting scenarios for the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, you also have, the offensive coordinator change in Las Vegas as well. So when you're looking at Adams, you're looking at that high price tag, Jay, where you're taking him, top to the middle of the second round in redraft leagues. Where are you at with DaVantae Adams this season? Do you think the cliff and the sunset season starts to happen in 2024? Or are you still willing to bet that DaVantae Adams continues to put up monster numbers for us in fantasy, even though that Trinity dropped down quite a bit this year? Where are you at with DaVantae Adams, man?
Yeah, DaVantae Adams is really tough. So yeah, new OC in the Raiders, which is great because people don't realize, as much as you hate Luke Getsy, here are DaVantae Adams' stats in 2 seasons with Luke Getsy as the pass game coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. 318 targets, 2,927 yards, and 27 touchdowns from 2020 and 2021 combined. Now, of course, Ray, the question is the offense Luke Getsy or is the offense Aaron Rodgers? I am kind of the belief that it is Aaron Rodgers' offense pretty much no matter where he goes at this point. Similar to like we've seen from Tom Brady. He runs the offense how he wants, doesn't really care who his OC is. He's going to figure out a way to win the game. But the thing with Luke Getsy and the familiarity with Adams, I think is great for Adams, right? The question is can he still remain a value or a good draft pick? Because we both agree that the ceiling for Adams is a little bit lower. His success rate dropped, his yardage dropped, his touchdowns weren't very high last year. He had to do a lot to get to where he got to. And when you look at his projections, 1,000 yards, 6.5 touchdowns, that's crazy. Adams is a guy every year, 8+ touchdowns on the books because they know he's right there for double digits. With Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, that's just not going to happen. I think there's also the case to be made, right? The interim head coaches do very well usually when they come in, and when they do well, the following season, when they're there for the whole year, they tend to struggle, and this offense may struggle a little bit. Even if Gardner Minshew is the quarterback, he was fine in Indy with Steichen, but how is he going to do with Getsy as his OC? I think Adams will be fine. I don't hate him at cost. He compares very well to Nico Collins, who, again, has a very high ceiling, but won't see as many targets as Adams will, even if the targets aren't as good. Chris Olave, another player right around his ADP range, actually has lower projections than Adams does. Brandon Ayuk, we don't know where he's playing next year, still has better projections than him. So I think there's still a lot of upside with Adams, but the biggest problem is, do you believe in Luke Getsy, who does have the familiarity with Adams, so I think he will get him the ball, but will Adams need 170, 180 targets to be relevant at his current cost? I think that's the biggest problem with Adams. I don't hate the pick. I think there's other players that possess higher ceilings around him. And I think ultimately Adams will be driven by volume, which is fine for fantasy football. But I don't know if he possesses the ceiling that we're hoping for in the back end of the second round, probably as your wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 1 if you go running back in the first round. So, Ray, how do you feel about Adams? Do you think he can thrive with Gardner Minshew in this new Luke Getsy offense?
I think so. I do believe that he can, but I also am reading the chat. Garrison says I can't draft him with that ADP. Forrest L7W says I can't draft him there, but he's going to deliver. There's no youth at wide receiver there to mess with him. Josh Harper said, I've been fading DaVantae and it hurts to do it. He also said a lot of the times with these vets, it isn't always their skill that falls off. It's the circumstances around them that get muddy and can cause them to slowly fall off, or one injury derails everything. Totally agree. That injury is the biggest X factor in football, period. That's the one thing that none of us can predict for. Aaron Rodgers popping his Achilles on the 4th, 8th play of the season. But I do agree with Josh. A lot of times it is not. And that's what Dwain and I were sort of talking about on that show, Jay, is we were speaking about the wide receiver position and the scheme. But a lot of times when you talk to people who played football, who played in the NFL, who played in college, it's not their individual talent that has waned or fallen off. They can play. The situation, the circumstances, the opportunity, the scheme changes around them, which impacts and influences what they can actually do on the field. You talked about at cost. Everybody's talking about the cost. Well, the next player I want to talk about is Mike Evans. I want to talk about Mike Evans, and you see the cost right here. DaVantae Adams, ADP 19.3, wide receiver 14. Got Mike Evans coming off the board 3 picks later as wide receiver 17, ADP of 23.2. So Mike Evans. Jay, I mean, this is a player that you have not been fond of for some time. I don't know what it is with Mike Evans, but you are not fond of Big Mike. He is an elite talent. He has been consistent. How many straight 1,000-yard seasons
going for 10,
Mike Evans? 9 straight 1,000-yard seasons. He's a monster in the red zone. Yes, we do know that Dave Canales, his offensive coordinator from last year, is gone. But, man, when you look at this wide receiver room, it is still Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. It feels like those two have been there for 10 years now. I feel like he's a safe bet for another 1,000-yard season. Now, I do know that his receiving yard line, as projected, is quite high, Jay. But where are you at this year with Baker Mayfield? I think it's set aggressively. I think it is set aggressively. But Baker Mayfield is back, new offensive coordinator, Mike Evans, older wide receiver. When does the cliff happen? Is it this year? Is it 2024 for Mike Evans, or can we just pencil him in for another 1,000-yard season and 6, 7, 8, 9+ touchdowns from Mike Evans in 24?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Evans is really interesting, but the funniest thing about Mike Evans is that people talk about the cliff. People talk about, is he declining? Well, Ray, let me give you some numbers about Mike Evans, because people don't realize he's actually ascending right now.
Well,
and
you don't have to. Why don't you give yourself those numbers? Because I don't frequently bash Mike Evans. I support Mike. Why don't you read them for yourself?
Okay,
read them for yourself.
Let's be honest about the situation. When we talk about Mike Evans, we talk about him poorly when he's playing the Saints, because I am a Marshawn Lattimore guy, and I'm not going to support Mike Evans when he drops bagels every time he wants to fight Marshawn Lattimore. But when you talk about values in fantasy football, Mike Evans is one of the best values in best ball drafts, period. In my opinion, he can rival Puka Nacua this season in terms of fantasy points scored. And the reason why, over the past 4 seasons, Ray, not just 2 or 1, 4 seasons in a row, or technically 3 seasons in a row, and I think this will be the next season, he's gone up in targets, receptions, and receiving yards while having 13 plus touchdowns in 3 of 4 seasons. So for a player who is already projected for 1,050 yards and 8 touchdowns, one of 7 players with a touchdown projection of 8 or higher on the books right now, I'm very confident in Mike Evans, and I'm very confident he will continue to play well, because the biggest thing last year, and anyone who listened to the podcast I did about the Bucs offense, this was an offense that was underrated by the fantasy community from the start, and the books were much more correct. And if you bought into Mike Evans and Chris Godwin last year, you got tremendous values. The problem is because of his age, because Canales left, the offense continues to be underrated yet again because they think it was all driven by Canales. And I think that's fair, because when you look at the drop-off when Canales left Geno Smith, 600 yards and I believe 8 touchdowns was the drop-off for Geno from year over year when he went from Canales to not having Canales. But even if you factor that in for Baker Mayfield, it's not that bad, because he still threw for 4,300 yards, and I believe he threw for almost 30 touchdowns last season. So I understand why people are scared about Evans due to age, but for a player who has increased his targets, receptions, and yards for the past 3 seasons, he is certainly not declining. And if anything, you would probably say he is ascending. And more importantly, I love his floor at his cost. And I think that's the main reason why I'd be drafting Mike Evans a lot in best ball. And even in redraft, if you want him as a wide receiver 1, you could have a better one, but he's really not that bad if you want to go running back to start your draft.
Let me ask you.
I think he's got a very high ceiling this year.
You like Adams, you like Evans. If you had to pick one for Dynasty, Mike Evans?
Not even close. Not even close. Quarterback play is a big one. And then the other thing, people need to remember this too,
You're that
right?
in on Baker? You're that in on Baker Mayfield. You're saying quarterback play.
Why would you not be in on Baker?
I'm just asking you. Are you
so,
that in?
Quarterback play is a big part
Baker
of it. I'm very uncertain about the offensive scheme that they're going to run for the Raiders and Luke Getsy overall. But it's more so about, look, Mike Evans has already had 9 straight 1,000-yard seasons. If I was betting on a player to have 1,000 yards again, it would be him. Even if they have to force him the ball week 17, week 18 to make sure he gets 1,000 yards, I think that's going to happen, because I think they want him, because I think he's, 2 years away from the record? Because I think 10 might tie the record and then 11 would break it. So I just think that at this point in his career, they're going to do everything they can to make sure he breaks that record. And with that type of volume, seeing, 100 and he only saw 136 targets last year, Ray, he could easily have 150. He's a player who is deserving of having a profile like that. And so when you look at Adams and the ceiling he possesses, it's because of the targets, not because of the quality and the way that he wins. Mike Evans' yards per reception has gone up each of the past 2 seasons. 16 yards a reception last year. 1,250 yards. Like, he's probably going to do it again, even without Canales, because the offense hasn't changed. Just the person who's calling it is a little bit different. So I think it's still going to be fine for Evans.
We're going to come back to Mike Evans and DaVantae Adams after this next player, because here's the thing. As we talk through all these names, it's like, oh yeah, I'm in. Bye. Let's ride. Evans, Adams, they should all be. Somebody's not going to be fine. Somebody's not going to be fine. Somebody, and it may not, and I want to go back to Josh Harper's point. It may not be directly related to that player's skill set falling off, but the stuff around the player. Shout out to Moggs in the chat. He's here every Monday. Moggs said Baker is a baller. 75% of the season last year, people thought he was still a bum. Going into the offseason, I don't know about Baker. He's not that good. No,
people were really out.
Is he a baller? Is he out? Is he good or is he bad? Like, it's easy to just look at things glass half full, optimistic outcome, but somebody is going to fall off. So let's talk about another geriatric wide receiver that is in the most cluttered, convoluted, confusing situation out there in fantasy football. One where I've heard multiple people say all 3 receivers are going to lead the team. They're going to trade some, cut some. Who knows what the hell the Chicago Bears are going to do. But Keenan Allen, JRich, people think that he was just a slot monster on the most deployed routes in the NFL, hitch, grow, and out route. Keenan Allen, out wide, led the league in scoring points per game. Outside, not in the slot, JRich. So I'm just letting y'all know, you might think he's just this slot-only guy, but Keenan Allen can line up inside and outside, and he's dominant in both areas. But Chicago Bears, rookie quarterback, new OC, all-pro receiver there, top 10 rookie, Keenan Allen, 12 games last year. The man had damn near 1,300 yards, JRich. They bring him in with Caleb Williams. I had Dwain on. Dwain thinks that in 2 wide receiver sets, it might be Rome and DJ Moore with Keenan Allen riding the bench. Where you at with Keenan Allen? Is this the old guy where you're finally going to say, I'm out on Keenan Allen, and let's just look at, where he's going, Jay? Let's look at where he's going on Underdog. Right now, Keenan Allen down here. I had Amari Cooper on there. We're not going to talk Amari Cooper. Keenan Allen right here, ADP 53.6, coming off of the board after players like Hollywood Brown, Terry McLaurin, Christian Kirk, George Pickens, Amari Cooper. Talk to me about Keenan Allen.
So Keenan Allen is definitely a little bit overvalued right now for all the things you just mentioned, right? And for people who didn't watch the piece with Dwain yet, one of the funniest parts was when you brought up their new OC in Shane Waldron. And his biggest concern was simply the fact that Shane Waldron didn't get his playmakers on the field, right? And so the question remains now is, you have DeAndre Swift, who was brought in. You obviously brought in Keenan Allen. You drafted Rome Odunze. You have DJ Moore. You have Cole Kmet. There's a lot of playmakers in this offense, and trying to actually figure out how it's going to break down, that is so difficult when you have so many question marks. And the biggest question mark, sadly enough, is Caleb Williams. We love Caleb Williams. He's probably going to be a phenomenal quarterback in the NFL. But historically, rookie quarterbacks do not support high-end wide receiver play. And when you have 2 very high-end wide receivers, how is this all going to work out? I think you would agree DJ Moore is probably the guy. If anyone wasn't going to be impacted, it would be DJ Moore. That's why his ADP is all the way up in the middle of the 3rd round. And Keenan Allen is down in the 50s. And he is a guy that I would be fading a little bit. Because, Ray, I don't know if you know this, but he has the same projection on DraftKings as Deontay Johnson. And so if you have to choose between Keenan Allen and Deontay Johnson, how do you feel about that? The alpha in Carolina, yes, but the number one gonna get the most targets, probably 140 to 150 easily, versus Keenan Allen, who could be declining a little bit, could see his snaps go down a little bit, simply because there's plenty of players to play and go around, and they don't need him to do everything like he did on the Chargers. Why would he want to do that when there's so much talent around him as well? So I think there's a case to be made that Keenan Allen's a little bit overvalued, and I'd be willing to potentially sell if someone was really in on him taking a step in this offense with Caleb Williams, because there's a lot of question marks about who's going to be the guy, and trying to pick who that guy is very, very difficult. Love Keenan, though. He's a phenomenal talent, but there could be a slight decline here in terms of the stats, but the skills, of course, are going to be more than fine.
This is an interesting one right here. And I want to pull up this comment from Historical Anomalies. Said Chicago radio station asked if Keenan Allen will come off the field. Says in 3 receiver sets, but I'm assuming it says this means 2 wide receiver sets. And Keenan boldly said no. Even in practice, Keenan said he switches to the X and the Z. This is just my opinion. There are different opinions in the chat. I think this is where we, in general, the enthusiasm and hopium for these rookies out the gate is a little bit bullish. It's too bullish. Like, I do believe, and I believe that what Dwain said is by the end of the season, you can see Odunze and DJ Moore on the field in 2 receiver sets. I do not believe that's going to be the case at the beginning of the season, and that has nothing to do with my non-belief in Rome Odunze. Y'all, this is how the shit works. Unless you are Marv or Puka and there's nobody else there, like there's veteran preference. That's just what happens. Veteran deference. Yeah. It's just, that's what's going to happen. I highly doubt week 1 of the Bears season, Keenan Allen standing on the sideline with his helmet in hand, watching Rome Odunze and DJ Moore in 2 receiver sets. Now, you get to the end of the season, yes, sure. Keenan Allen has historically been banged up. He's older, played in 13 games last year. So can he even be on the field the entire season? I don't know. But this is one where I both agree with you, Jay, that I believe maybe a little overrated, but also disagree because I still think Keenan Allen is going to be a big part of that offense. And more importantly,
for sure,
what I think is going to happen is all 3 of them are going to be very good for Caleb Williams. And I think this is going to be good for Caleb Williams and the Chicago Bears offense as a whole, and maybe a little frustrating for us from a fantasy perspective. The only one that I would feel great about plugging into a starting lineup where you, not best ball, but you got to put him in there, would probably be DJ Moore at this point in time. We'll see how things shake out over training camp, but this is another one where, the skill is clearly still there. Look at what he produced. The skill is there.
Yeah.
Can he stay healthy? Father Time is undefeated, and the older you get, you don't feel fresher as you get older. So this is one with, given the injury history, the uncertainty of the situation, the newness of it, I do agree with you that Keenan Allen probably in general is a little overvalued, Jay. Let's switch positions briefly and talk about a player who I think his success or failure may have one of the bigger sort of peripheral impacts on fantasy football, because you've got a lot of high leverage pieces, or at least 2 very high leverage pieces in this offense. But if this player does not come through, Jay, then I'm very curious to see what the fantasy space will do. And I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers. JRich, we're talking about Aaron Rodgers, who is making his return back from Achilles tear that he suffered at the first game of the season, barely played. We know what Aaron Rodgers brings to the table. He's a former MVP. He's a future first ballot Hall of Famer. He can throw the ball wherever he wants. The accuracy is there. No fear, YOLO ball. But, I mean, we're talking about a player who is now, 39, 40 years old, Aaron Rodgers. This is still a new team for him, a new scheme. You bring in a total, new allotment of young players, veteran players. And if Aaron Rodgers does what he's supposed to do, Jay, and you make that bet and you're right and the outcome is positive, well, what happens? Breece Hall probably is very good, top running back in fantasy football. Garrett Wilson has a chance to finally return the value that his 2022 draft capital has been able to hold for the past 2 years. But if he fails, Jay, I don't think it's going to impact Breece Hall. Breece Hall will still be fed. He's still going to get a shit ton of carries. But if Aaron Rodgers fails, what will that do? Not for Rodgers and his value. His value is what it is. No one really cares. What's that do for Garrett Wilson? And that's really the conversation. If Aaron Rodgers busts or does not adjust or is not the same type of player, what's that do for What's that do for Garrett Wilson and his dynasty value long term?
I think that's an interesting question, only because I'm not overly concerned about Garrett Wilson long term. Only because for some reason he's maintained this value, right? Like you said, 2 years in a row, the talent's been there, the targets have been there, the yards are not. And Dwain aired his frustrations about the situation because people talk about Garrett Wilson like he's not that good, but it's just like, come on, what do you want the guy to do? We talked about DaVantae Adams, how we're worried about him because of the quarterback play. He'll have the best quarterback play of his career. I think if Rodgers is bad, he'll still be the best quarterback play of his entire career. So I think the question is, Ray, is if Aaron Rodgers is not 100%, let's say he's 80%.
All right.
I still think there is a pretty damn high ceiling for Garrett Wilson if Aaron Rodgers isn't quite what he's supposed to be. Now, his projection is 37, 50, 26 touchdowns. I think when you talk about him in terms of his absolute ceiling, the 4,000-yard, 30 touchdown ceiling that we know Aaron Rodgers has, I don't think that's going to happen or not happen because of Garrett Wilson, right? So even if Aaron Rodgers only throws for 3,200 yards, Garrett Wilson could still have 1,500 of those yards and still have 10 touchdowns. So I think that's where it's like interesting because it's the auxiliary players will be affected by Aaron Rodgers' poor play, in my opinion. I still think Garrett Wilson's getting those 180 targets. I still think he's getting those 175 targets. So even if his skills are diminished a little bit, the targets, in my opinion, will be there. And because that arm's still good, right? That pocket mobility and his ability to buy time, that may diminish a bit, and that we may see those skills decline. but that arm and that mind, more importantly, should be more than fine. So I'm not so worried about Garrett Wilson. I think he's going to be okay.
That mind score you got, huh? How's that mind score for Aaron
Caleb
Rodgers?
Williams said Aaron Rodgers is his GOAT.
Remember that game where Aaron Rodgers, he just said fuck it and was throwing picks? Was it versus the Saints where he was just launching balls
the
down
opening week? The opening week, yeah. When the Saints beat them like 50-10 or something. That was the game that Jameis Winston threw 5 touchdowns on like 17 pass attempts or something stupid like
Rodgers was ready to go home. He was just throwing the damn ball.
And he won MVP that year.
Well, because people remember that. People were like, oh, man, this dude stinks. Look at what he did
cooked,
game 1. And then,
right?
and then he went on and won MVP. People in the chat, they said Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers?
Kirk Cousins. It's close, though. It's close. Very close.
You went Kirk because he's younger, didn't you? Man, he's a little bit younger. Why'd you go Kirk?
I was only thinking for this season. I think the ceiling is a little bit higher for the offense because of the playmakers. And I do like the offense better, right? We're bringing a Rams offense with the playmaker. The Rams offense.
I don't know if I could disagree. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not disagreeing with you. Let's stick with positions not named wide receiver. Talk about another offense who's we think should be very good. We're excited. We don't know, but we saw flashes from this offense last year to lead us to believe that they could be a lot better this season. And they upgraded their offensive line again, added more playmakers for their young star quarterback, who's another season removed from ACL tear. James Conner, old man James Conner. JRich, like, is this your chance just to get off or get on the Conner ride? Because I do think that as we inch closer to the season and we start to get to training camp and the obvious news that James Conner's the starting damn running back and going to take all the carries, you probably can get a second round pick for James Conner. I don't think that is out of bounds to say you can get a second for Conner. Are you just getting it now and being done with it? Or are you like, you know what? I want to see what James Conner can bring to the table. Right now, ADP at 92.7, RB 27 off of the board. DeAndre Swift and Zach Moss coming off of the board before James Conner. Jay, where you at with Conner? Are you just getting rid of him now, or are you like, man, I'm riding this tank into the wheels fall off for this Cardinals offense? Get one of these veterans. The only veteran you haven't liked so far is Keenan Allen.
Yes. So, Ray, I think the question remains is, do you prefer James Conner or Raheem Mostert? Because I kind of prefer Raheem Mostert. And he's right there.
Man.
He's right. He's the only guy, though, I think that, like, I'd say, okay, well, I would take Mostert over Conner. But behind him, you have teammates.
In Dynasty, I don't think you could. Can you get a second from Mo? I feel pretty confident that I could trade my James Conner and get a second round pick to some contender. Can you do that with Mostert?
Really? You only get a second for Mostert?
I don't. That's what I'm asking.
People are in on A-Chan, right?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Can you really get a
problem?
Can you get a second for Mostert? I still don't think the name doesn't ring, Jay. It doesn't hold a lot of weight, Raheem Mostert. But talk about Conner. Are you in or out? Are you in? Is he busting for us? Is the cliff happen this year? Or are you riding the tank again?
I think I wouldn't be riding the tank again, personally. There's just some running backs I prefer a little bit lower down the board. It's an interesting spot if he's, your RB2 on like a heavy.
You want to ride that Conner this season?
No, and it's funny because people love Trey Benson, Ray. I don't know if you know this, but people love Trey Benson.
They love Trey Benson.
I know you know. So I'm a little bit fearful of Trey Benson, but I do have to ask you, because this is kind of the big conundrum for me. You talked about in the notes how James Conner is probably going to have the red zone role. Completely agree with that. Kyler Murray, will he run in the red zone? Probably a little bit as well. But do you think that Trey Benson can take the pass catching role from Conner? Because if he can, that's when I think you get to look at Conner and say, is he really just more of a 1-2 back? He hasn't been that in the past. He's been great in the receiving game, even in the past couple seasons. Now, last year was a little bit worse only because he didn't have Kyler Murray, but the previous 2 seasons, 46 receptions, 37 receptions, 300 yards in each season. But last year, only 27 receptions, 165 yards, but did have 2 touchdowns. If Trey Benson can take his role in the pass catching game, that's where I'm kind of like, maybe he won't be that good and a little bit overrated, but the cost is relatively
pretty good
low,
in the receiving game, James Conner, and in the red zone. He got tons of work.
Red zone is great. Red zone is great.
James Conner.
But if he's only 1-2, and Benson kind of take that role a bit, that's where I have fears kind of down the stretch. Benson gets more involved.
I don't know.
A little bit. I think there's a reason to be a little bit concerned. Not super concerned, but when you're talking about a Raheem Mostert who's going to be like, dude, led the league in touchdowns last season, and he barely has a top 100 ADP. Right? You have a player in Javonte Williams who could have a similar season, but not as much there. But Brian Robinson being so low down the board as well. Brian Robinson's probably going to be great for fantasy this season. So it's like he's not a bad price, but he's not my favorite running back in that range. I'd be willing to let him go a little bit.
Jimbo
I'm
is
not
one
a
of
big
those
Benson
people.
guy, but I don't think he's
Jimbo said he's
irrelevant.
beamed up for Benson. He's planting those beans. He is beamed up for Benson. Richie, agree with you. People love Benson. Benson moved him and Shakir for Spears and Jaden Reed. Yeah, give me Spears and Jaden Reed all day, every day.
Would you take Spears over Connor?
Apparently, we said something.
What did I say?
Worthy. I don't know what we said, but we said something pause
said
worthy.
something good.
And also, there are nobody said they can get a second for Connor. They said they can't get a second for Connor.
Ooh, not now, but once the season comes around,
That's what we said.
Yeah, you gotta wait on him a little bit.
You can't get a second for Connor in the perceived
Come
workload.
on, man. This dude's 30 years old. He plays on the Arizona Cardinals. Like, they stink, man. They're terrible. But he did have 200 carries last season, he'd be his fourth straight year on Arizona if he did have 200 carries yet again. But still a player only in the realm of around 250 opportunities or so. But at the cost, pretty solid, honestly. It's not bad at all. Beamed up for Benson.
Beamed up
is
for
gonna have to be a thing this
Benson
season.
that is a thing. We are definitely, that is going to be the slogan for our campaign. Beamed up for Benson. I like it. Jay, we love Puka Nacua. We love Puka Nacua, JRich. And Puka Nacua is very good.
Kind of poo-pooed on Puka.
Puka Nacua is very, very good, Jay. But I want to talk about his running mate, Cooper Kupp.
Oh, yes.
And let me get Puka off the screen. And what I want to talk about Kupp in the perspective that I want to talk about it is there a world, Jay, where Cooper Kupp was like declining? And and I'm not going to share, during the season I had heard from some people that he was not, that physically that things weren't going well for Cooper Kupp, and they were like, hey, Puka's going to be the guy. And I was told this early in the season and went on to see how that all played out. But he's back now. People are excited. He's being drafted much higher than where he was. We're going to talk about Cooper Kupp and a little bit of Diggs. Cooper Kupp, ADP of 29 on Underdog. Wide receiver 22 off of the board, ahead of Michael Pittman, Tank Dell, Zay Flowers, everybody else behind that. Do you think that that maybe it wasn't just the injury, but this is just the decline of Cooper Kupp? Like we started to see the decline last season, and the enthusiasm and hope that we have for him to return to form this year is pretty much magic bean hopium. And this is, like, we just saw it, that the team, the NFL, we saw it last year. That's all you need to see. It's Puka Nacua. Cooper Kupp's going to be the second ancillary option, or does he return to form, Jay? This is one where I don't really know what to do with him, because he does seem like the type of player that if he played a couple of more seasons, even if he's not the one, with Stafford and this McVay offense, he should return solid value for your rosters. But he also seems like the type of cat that can hang the shit up at the end of the year and not give a damn. Like, I'm good, like, regardless, like, I'm fine. Where you at with Kupp, man?
Yeah, Cooper Kupp is very difficult.
No one's talked about Kupp a lot. I haven't seen a lot of conversation about Kupp either.
Yeah, I mean, the range, DK Metcalf, who I always love. I think he has a massive touchdown ceiling in a peak season, right? DJ Moore, going to be the alpha on a great offense. Stefon Diggs, he's a bit of a question mark. But then you have Cooper Kupp, followed by Michael Pittman, then Zay Flowers, LOL. That's a good one. So the big thing for me with Kupp is I do believe there's a touchdown ceiling there. I wouldn't be surprised if he led the Rams in receiving touchdowns ahead of Puka Nacua, but you just laid the case. He's played 21 games in the past 2 seasons. So that already is not great, especially for a player who has dealt with injuries in the past, and more importantly, has only played 7 seasons in the NFL, right? Did you know that Cooper Kupp has not played 100 regular season games in his career yet? He will hit that mark this season, but you talk about a guy who at one time had 191 targets, 1,947 yards,
man.
but only has 2,000 yard seasons and only has 2 double-digit touchdown seasons. When you extrapolate his season last year, it was right around 83 receptions, 1,000 yards, and 7 touchdowns, which is fine. But I believe that if that's what you're expecting, you're okay. But if you want this high ceiling, this Puka Nacua, this hyper-targeted volume, and especially, to some degree, no missed games, you might be a little bit over your skis, because that one magical season from Cooper Kupp, it was insane, but he hasn't had more than 800 yards since, and his yards per reception did go up last season, which was great for him. But I think you're kind of banking on a more touchdown-dependent option with some volume weekly, but he's probably going to be a guy who catches 5 passes for 60 yards, and on down weeks when he doesn't score, he's probably busting in your fantasy lineup. So it's a bit of a problem. He's 31 years old. I think the price is okay, but I'm more than happy to take a Michael Pittman instead of him.
Right.
Ray, would you prefer a Tank Dell over Cooper Kupp? Tank Dell is a guy I have a lot of questions about, but the ceiling, holy hell, is high.
Yes.
Right? And I think the question when you talk about Diggs and Kupp, you have an offense that can clearly support 2 wide receivers in the Rams and a wide receiver that needs to support 3 in Houston, but does have one of the highest ceilings in the NFL with CJ Stroud at the helm. So talk about Stefon Diggs, because he's going to be the wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 for the Houston Texans, where Cooper Kupp will probably be the wide receiver 2 in a Rams offense that can absolutely support 2 pass catchers, versus the Texans that now need to support 3, with all those players having a top 40 ADP on Underdog.
Listen, Jay, I mean, you laid the case out against Cooper Kupp and for Kupp, like why he could, but also why he could not. This is one where I've just started to dive into Bobby Slowick and what he does offensively. I do. The only thing that I can say is I do believe that Stefon Diggs is going to play in the slot. That's just my personal opinion. Looking at where Tank Dell and Nico Collins aligned last year for Houston, Jay, surprisingly, as I started to study that offense and deep dive into some of the NFL stuff, you know who the X was for Houston last year? You know who was who played that X role for Houston last year?
I would imagine it's Nico Collins.
It's Tank Dell.
Based off the profile.
Tank Dell was lined. Tank Dell scored more points per game aligned on the outside than Nico Collins did in 2023. Lining on the right-hand side of the offense, you know, CJ Stroud drops back, opens up that way, lining up on the right-hand side out wide. But he led that team in scoring out wide last year. I think Dell is going to operate as that team's X. I do believe that Nico Collins will still be very much involved, big play, field stretching guy. But I think Diggs is going to handle a lot of the short, intermediate stuff underneath and operate in the slot. Does he fall off? Is he cooked? I don't believe that he has fallen off. There's nothing that I saw last year from Diggs that suggested that his play fell off. It looked, because if you look at that offense,
lowlights, right?
Well, if you look at that offense as a whole, things changed for everybody once Ken Dorsey was removed and they put Joe Brady in that offense. The only player it was really good for offensively for Buffalo was James Cook. Things went up for James Cook. Gabe Davis, Stefon Diggs, everything plummeted. It was good for James Cook, good for Dalton Kincaid, but Dalton Kincaid, not Dalton Kincaid.
Let's go.
I'm thinking about the Lakers, man. I'm thinking about the Lakers. Dalton Kincaid, JRich. But let's move on to another old geriatric wide receiver.
So do you like Diggs or not? What you did? I laid out the whole case, and you didn't say whether you liked him or not. I think he's a fine value. I don't think he has a ceiling, though. In my opinion, you need to take him as a fine wide receiver with a low ceiling, because the ceiling is with probably Collins and with Dell. But Ray, do you believe in Stefon Diggs? Yes or no? I won't even bother asking about Cooper Kupp, but Diggs, yes or no? Are you in or out? That's what the show is about. Are you buying or selling?
I think I'd lean more towards in. I would lean more towards in than out on Stefon Diggs. I would lean more in
I'd
than
sell high
out.
on the first big game, I think.
Probably.
Yeah. I think I'd sell high
too.
on the first big game.
I probably would too, Jay. Probably
picture,
thinking
bro.
about that. That picture of Stefon Diggs.
Jay,
let's talk about tight end. Y'all know who we're going to talk about. Is it going to happen this year, Jay? I'm just going to ask the question. Is it going to happen this year, or are we good for another year? What are we doing with him, Jay? What are we doing with him? Because he's back high. I mean, people are back in on the Travis Kelce train. He read up. He said that he's good. He said that he wants to show everybody that he has still got it, that $1 billion booty did not make him lazy, that he's ready to go get it this season in the NFL. Does it happen this year for Travis Kelce, or does he continue to just smash as he always has?
Always has? Were you saying that
defensively?
or?
When he's on the field and healthy, yes. He's always smashing, yes.
So is smashing for Travis Kelce 93 receptions, not even 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns? Is that smashing?
93 receptions is pretty good. But okay, you're gonna pick one season out. Go pick the other 15 out. If you want to put,
we're talking about a guy who's 35 years old.
So are you? It's pretty obvious you're out then. You're talking about
no,
what
I
said.
I'm in at cost. So the thing with Kelce, right? He's been a guy who's in the top 20 in ADP every single season. He's not even tight end 1 on Underdog. I'm in. I don't care if he is 1,000-yard receiver. I don't care if he only scores 7 touchdowns. The cost you're getting on Travis Kelce is great. And I think the biggest factor here, Ray, that people aren't accounting for is there could be a very hot start if Rashee Rice is not available. Because we know that Patrick Mahomes takes a while to get a feel for his receivers. Doesn't matter if it's Hollywood Brown, who's a veteran and going to probably step in as the number 1 wide receiver, if Rashee Rice isn't there. But that means Travis Kelce is probably getting hyper-targeted and could have an extremely hot start to the season. Is he going to ultimately be this great fantasy asset, this difference maker? I don't know if that's the case, but if you're telling me I can take Sam Laporta or Mark Andrews in the same range as Kelce, which has never happened, I'm more than happy to take a few shots on Kelce there. I think all 3 are in tune for massive seasons, and all 3 have very similar projections. But Ray, on DraftKings right now, Travis Kelce has an over-under of yards of 900. Where would you stand at 900 yards for Travis Kelce?
Over.
It's juiced to the under at -130 right now.
Yeah.
I think the question with Kelce isn't the skills or the talent. It's whether he's actually going to play hard for the whole season, because he's basically Gronk right now.
Does he play hard for the full
does
season?
He care about this? But does he care about the season? You saw the playoffs, bro.
He's playing.
He can do it.
Let me tell you something, man. If you're out there playing, you care. If you're out there playing, you care. You're not caring and putting your life on the line every play if you don't care. So we're not. But
the offense isn't going to run through him the way it did in the playoffs in the regular season.
Yes, it is.
Right?
Who's it going to run through? You just said Rashee Rice. Who else is it going to run through?
I don't know. It didn't run through him last year.
It's going to run through Travis Kelce.
He had the lowest target count he had since 2017 last year. He did miss a couple games, and that's a fair point. But it's like, if he's not hyper targeted, he may not be crazy.
Answer this question. If not Kelce, who does the offense run through?
Rashee Rice. And I think, more importantly, the running game. We know the Chiefs need to run the ball, and they're very successful at it. It will be it's not a question of whether he's great. It's whether he has a higher ceiling than Sam Laporta and Mark Andrews. So who do you think of those 3 has the highest ceiling?
I'm telling you my answer. If in this scenario, you talked about Rashee Rice potentially being absent. If Rashee Rice is absent, whether he's there, the offense is going to flow through 87. It's going to go inside out. Patrick Mahomes doesn't even throw the ball downfield. It's low, short, intermediate, then it's deep, last option. Rashee Rice is out. Who else does it run through? It's not running through Hollywood.
Nobody.
They're not going to run it through Xavier Worthy. It's going to be ran through Travis Kelce. We're not going to talk about him wanting to play and all this other shit. He's back. He's on the field. He read up. He's on the field with Patrick Mahomes in Andy Reid's offense. Yes, I'm buying into Travis Kelce. Another one of those guys, the first player that we talked about was Derrick Henry, and I'm willing to ride off in the sunset. Of all the players we discussed, he is the one where you cannot get what he's worth in the trade market. We talked about James Conner for a second. Cool, you can't get him for a second, you get 2/3. Who gives a shit? Whatever, same difference. Kelce's worth probably a first-round pick, even if it's just for a season, for the hopium and potential of what could happen with Patrick Mahomes and the positional advantage and the scoring advantage you get from having a tight end like that who can do those type of things. It's probably worth it first, yet nobody's going to pay you for that. So that is the epitome of the type of player that if I have him on my roster and I'm competing, I'm rolling off into the sunset with Travis Kelce. Of all the players that is the one where I'm just like, Henry, I can't get a first. Who gives a shit? Right? This player can't get a first, can't get a second. I can maneuver. It's fine. Kelce is worth that, even if just for one magical 1,000+ yard season and the difference that he can make for your rosters. Travis Kelce, JRich, I am in on Mr. Kelce. Let's talk about another running back really quickly. In or out, Jay? This player, AK-41. Projected for like 600 yards on DraftKings right now.
625, bro.
625 yards. Like, what are we doing for AK-41? But Kamara, back in New Orleans. Dwain is very excited about this potential New Orleans offense under new offensive coordinator Carmichael. Is it Pete Carmichael that's down there right now? I believe in New Orleans.
No, thank goodness. It's Clint
yeah,
Kubiak?
Clint Kubiak, excuse me, not Carmichael.
Is that right? Is it Clint or is it
Yeah,
Gary?
I think it is
There's
Kubiak.
too many Kubiaks.
Yeah, I think it's Kubiak.
It's one of the Kubiaks.
It's a Kubiak,
I think
I believe.
it's Clint. I forget. I think it's Clint. But yeah, so
we'll talk about Kamara. Where you in or out on this Alvin Kamara? Mog said he is in on AK.
I think he's a little expensive, man. I really do. The Saints offense
Underdog
is not
ADP.
good.
Where's
The
he at?
offense
He's going.
where's he at right now? I have him at
right
75.
He's at 77, RB 18.
Oh, so
behind
David Montgomery passed him.
David Montgomery, Kenneth Walker, Rachaad White, all ahead of Alvin Kamara.
So here's the guys. So for me, Najee Harris is a guy I would take over Kamara. Ramondre Stevenson would take over him. After that, I think it's a little bit closer. I'm sort of selling Kamara at this price. The rushing yards is just awfully low. Like, he's not a good running back right now. And that's the biggest problem is he can catch passes.
Wasn't he an RB1 every week when he came back from his suspension last year? Just every single week, RB1, he was in a top 12 running back and RB1 every week, I think up until like week 17. Like when we needed him.
Yeah, because he had 86 targets last year. Like the targets were just
that's
insane.
What Kamara does. That's what Kamara does.
But will the targets still be there in this new offense, right? That's kind of the thing is he takes so much away from the pass catchers in the offense, and Derek Carr can just check it down over and over and over and over. And if they're going to run more play action, which they didn't, I believe Dwain said they were 13% last season, like the lowest in the NFL. And it's the reason why Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave struggled was because they didn't confuse the defense. They just sat back and passed. And the question is will Derek Carr actually do that? Because Dwain brought up the point that maybe Derek Carr doesn't like that because historically he's not good in play action. So if they run the same offense, Kamara will probably be a fine value. They're not going to run the same offense. We know that. That's the hope. But Dwain didn't sound so confident. And if Derek Carr can't be better or different, then it's going to be the same thing back again. And I'm kind of out on that. I don't think the Saints are going to be very good. I don't think they're going to put up a ton of points. I don't think Derek Carr is particularly good. Kamara will probably be fine. But I think if you want to go another direction with a guy that you believe has a higher ceiling, I'm with that.
Rachaad White or Alvin Kamara?
I kind of like Rachaad White.
No, I'm just asking. Those are some of the names that are ahead of him. Montgomery or Kamara?
Montgomery for sure. I'm just leaning on the offense.
I'm going up high. Josh Jacobs or Kamara?
Jacobs is a guy I'm very in on this year. I think could be a lot better than people think he could be, personally.
Okay. All right, Jay. Final player.
Kamara's tough.
Final player. Let's talk about him. Big Nuke. DeAndre Hopkins, Tennessee. Proven talent. Could be the one for Will Levis in this new Brian Callahan offense. They brought in Calvin Ridley. You still have Chico Okonkwo. They got 2 running backs. You've got an unproven young quarterback, new system. DeAndre Hopkins, phenomenal when he's on the field, Jay. But shit, man. Like, is it cliff season for Nuke, or is Nuke still good? And let's take a look at his ADP and talk about the players he's being drafted around and his potential cost coming off the board. Wide receiver 40, so it's not like he's being drafted super high, but behind Addison, Rashee Rice, ahead of Ladd McConkey, BTJ, Deontay Johnson, Christian Watson, JSN, sort of the range that Hopkins is in right now. Where you at?
I personally am very much in on the pass catchers and the passing offense of the Tennessee Titans right now. I do believe they are being a little bit underrated in the market. When you look at Calvin Ridley, who has an ADP of right around 57 or so, I pulled this from last week or a few days ago. in the Chris Godwin, Jaden Reed, Keenan Allen, Xavier Worthy range, identical projection to that of DeAndre Hopkins. I think everyone's assuming Calvin Ridley is the one, but what the books and the sports markets are telling you is that they believe there's a pretty equal chance that either one could be the one, or they operate as co-alphas in the offense. And so when you're talking about a team where you can potentially buy the number one for a number two price, DeAndre Hopkins is a fantastic buy right now, a fantastic guy to acquire, to draft in best ball, because we know that he's a dude that can have a very high touchdown ceiling because he's great in the red zone. And more importantly, if Brian Callahan chooses to throw the ball a lot, which we sort of expect based off their personnel and how he operated in Cincinnati, there could be a very high ceiling. Everything ultimately lands on Will Levis's shoulders and whether he's good or not. But last year, everyone was fading two very good wide receivers over the quarterback. And that was the situation out in Tampa Bay. And they threw the ball a lot, and Baker was a lot better than people expected. If Will Levis can be a little bit better than people expect, and Nuke Hopkins and Calvin Ridley do what they do very well, and that's be 1,000-yard receivers, they will both be great for fantasy, and they both return value. I'm very in on DeAndre Hopkins at cost. He's behind a lot of rookies and second-year players that he shouldn't be behind, and is an absolute steal right now in underdog drafts.
He also, when you look at the Trinity, was very, very high. One of the highest scores on the table, 8.78. He was below the regression line, only scored us 13 fantasy points, but just historically, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Of the players that we talked about at the wide receiver position, he, DaVantae Adams, and Keenan Allen all had higher scores, the highest Trinity scores of the group, higher than Stefon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, some of the players that we talked about. So just based off of that and historically how this thing tracks out, I'd be mildly in on DeAndre Hopkins as well. His score was much higher than that of even Calvin Ridley when he was down in Jacksonville getting all of those targets. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out in that situation. I think the bigger question is, are you in on Will Levis? And I think a lot of people, most people are. I'm in on Will Levis. You're in. I am cautious. I'm not in nor out. I'm very cautious on Will Levis. Really? But there you go. I saw. Yeah. We'll see.
Will Levis is going to have. Man, in the range of
I'm
Geno
not.
Smith,
I'm not in on Will Levis. I'm cautiously waiting to see how that's going to be.
Take him over Watson.
Who, Will Levis over Watson?
Is a really interesting conversation.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. Give me Deshaun Watson. All right, y'all. Appreciate y'all watching this show. JRich and I, we will be on Bleacher Report here very soon, Jay.
Minutes.
like in the next hour. So make sure you jump on Bleacher Report with JRich and I, where we talk about the greatest rosters of all time. Yes. All-time rosters. We got the steel curtain defense of the Pittsburgh Steelers of the 70s. Got the Bears, Walter Payton, Sweetness, Refrigerator Perry, Jim McMahon, 85. Let's do the shuffle, baby. The 72 Dolphins. We got the Pats. We got Joe Montana and Steve Young. We're going to talk the greatest rosters of all time. Be there here in the next 30 minutes over on Bleacher Report. Jay, anything you want to say to people before we get out of here, baby?
No, man, hope everyone has a good week. Make sure you check out all of the great content. Ray, I know you got some heat dropping later in the week, so stay tuned for that, because it will be more Trinity, more targets, more wide receivers. More schemes. And I believe you said you're doing the Jacksonville Jaguars, so I will be locked in for that.
Yeah, Jags. Yeah,
because I would say I'm quiet about it, but I have a very good feeling about Brian Thomas. I don't know if I should, but I have a very good feeling about him. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I'm excited to watch your video about it.
As do I. Appreciate that. That'll be out. We will be here next Monday, same time, same place. Stay tapped into all the content. JRich, go ahead and wrap us up. Get us up out of here, baby.
All right, everybody. Make sure you like the content. Subscribe if you're new. And as always, be great. Be great. And make sure to check out our Sun Bleacher Report, because it's going to be a good, fun show. But Ray, thank you so much for navigating through this. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in the chat. And we'll see you guys next week. We're out. Peace.